is the demand supposed to come from? That's the question I'm posing to you and everyone who works in the business of agriculture in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey friends, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I'm asking the question, where is the demand supposed to come from that we keep hearing about? And I think you're going to say, Damian, this goes down a little bit of a path that I've been hearing from you lately. Yes, it does. And it's because it's one of the most important topics that I think we need to address. I shot a short video about this just recently. I was out here working on my farm. And I want to apologize if you're watching. You're saying, Damian, you're kind of not your usual appearance. So if you're listening, you can't see this. If you're on my YouTube channel, and I hope you are, because I'm really trying to grow my subscribers over there, go to the Damian Mason channel on YouTube, hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. But if you're on there watching or on Acres TV watching, you're saying, hey, man, what's the deal? Well, I'm wearing my sweaty hat. I'm completely soaked on this shirt right here. My pants are wet because it's like 94 degrees and humid. And I was out working on my farm. And for the last 2 days, it's a weekend while I'm recording this, I got to tell you, I have been unable to get this out of my head. I've been unable to get it out of my head. I recorded a video about it when I was down in Tennessee at a field day, a short video about the reality of demand and how we need to change our thinking. I've shot episodes about this before, but I'm going to take this a different direction. So I'm coming in from my farm because I said, you know what? Get this on tape right now. I'm thinking about it. I'm out here working on the farm. Get this on tape. So that's why sweaty hat, sweaty clothes, unshaven, unshowered, and unscripted, which is always the case, and also unfiltered, which is also always the case. Where's the demand going to come from? What am I talking about? Okay. I just pay attention to a lot of media, and I try to pay attention to a variety of media. And I'm flipping through when I'm driving my truck, and I'm listening to rural radio a week or so ago, and I hear Scott Shellady. He's the cow guy. He and I don't know each other personally. We know of one another. He's a sharp guy. But they're talking about markets. They're talking about commodities. And he said, the only thing that's going to move this is we got to pick up demand. And I hear this a lot, and I hear it in a lot of ag circles. And I go to agricultural meetings where I'm getting paid to speak, and I hear people that are market experts, commodities market experts, which I willingly admit, and I've told you all the time, my degree is in agricultural economics. I will never call myself a markets expert. I'm a marketplace observer and a big picture global guy about the business of agriculture. But there's people that are a hell of a lot more knowledgeable about 2-cent moves in the soybean complex, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I hate it. I've never wanted to do that in my life. But I pay attention. And I know where these prices are. And you know where these prices are. And I'm talking about most everything. With the exception of eggs and beef, most everything right now is oversupplied on a global market. And prices of production are greater than actual market prices. Using the big commodities of corn, wheat, and soybeans, you're right there. Not exactly sure about rice, but I can tell you cotton. Another great example. So here's the thing. When they're talking on the Market Day Report on rural radio, or maybe I tune into my friend Joe Vaklovic, who's got a great YouTube channel. You should really go and check him out. And they talk about demand. I get it. We are a global society, a global economy. We trade stuff. We produce agricultural commodities in vast sums here in the United States of America. We need trading partners. But I keep hearing this thing about, well, we're just going to have to pick up some demand, and all of a sudden these prices improve. Where's it going to come from? I've posed this question in multiple of my short videos, and I will remind you again, there's nobody on the planet right now with a wallet full of cash and a plate that's empty with no food on it. If you have the money, you have the food. We are completely oversupplied, which means then we need more demand. And that's what we keep answering, because forever what have we done in agriculture? We've addressed the supply thing. Go to field days like the video I shot from Tennessee. We're talking about reducing trips across the field, less diesel. We're talking about how to cut back on our fertility because we're over-applying fertility. Those efficiency gains are very important, but they never address the underlying problem of stagnating demand. You know, I had Richard Sexton on, a professor from UC Davis, and I didn't want to disagree with him too adamantly on this show because I am very respectful to my guests, but the guy's full of shit. The guy went down this whole road. I thought it was like 1975 all over again. Oh, well, you, Damian? I said, we're oversupplied. No, this is a real threat. Too much CRP. These solar contracts taking up cropland. I'm like, yeah, I don't like any of those things, solar taking up cropland. But if we took 500,000 acres out of the American crop production mix, it's a spit in the wind, literally a spit in the wind compared to our productive capacity, which is increasing by 2, 5, 7% more each year because of better technology, better utilization of water, better fertility products, better utilization of the technology to get the crop out of the field, etc. So Richard Sexton, who was on my show here a couple weeks ago, I beg to differ, but you are spouting 1975 stuff that we're all going to starve, population. He went down the same road of ancient information. Oh, we're going to have a global population boom? Bullshit. Why do you think Elon Musk is all over Twitter talking about the population bust? It's not going to be an issue. So here's my question. Where's the demand going to come from? I'm not disagreeing with my friends in this industry that say we need to pick up demand, but I'm just going to ask the question, where's it going to come from? Let me give you some numbers. Okay, you ready for some numbers? We have the United States of America. Let's use the two. I'm an Indiana guy, as you mostly know. So there's corn and soybeans all around on the country roads here in Huntington County, Indiana. We're going to produce 4.3 billion bushels of soybeans this year on 83.5 million acres. And yes, these are USDA projections. Also, the trade industry. The trade is making projections, and they're all right in there. These are the predictions and projections for this year, 2025. And you're saying, yeah, well, let me just give you a little dose of truth about this. That's so darn many soybeans on so many more acres than we used to grow. Not a lot more acres, but it's substantially more than it used to be. But just what do you think the number is? 4.3 billion bushels we're going to make this year. What do you think it was 45 years ago in 1980? I'm not even talking about, after the bust and the farm economy before that, because really the farm crisis didn't begin until late 81, mid-late 81, 82, 83. So before that, full capacity. How many bushels, do you think there were in the United States? About 1.5 billion. So we're roughly three times the amount of soybean production this year than we were 45 years ago. You're saying, yeah, Damian, but the population, true story. Global population grew and global economies grew to absorb that new supply because of their demand. So my question to you is, how do you think this all is going to play out? It's the year 2025. You've heard me talk about it a number of times where population is stagnating. We're going to start to have a stagnating of population growth. We're at 8 billion globally. We're not going to get to 9.7 billion like Richard Sexton and his other outdated professors that give information to the United Nations think. We're going to be right around this number. So where's the new demand going to come from? Okay, rising economics. And I've been hearing about this a lot also. Okay, China. The China miracle will not happen again. They're already there. They're the second biggest economy in the world. 16% of global economic output, GDP as it's called, gross domestic product. 16% of the globe's economy is in China. About 25% is right here at the United States. So you're over 40%. Two countries out of 180 countries all over the world. Two of them account for just a little less than half, 40+% of global economic activity is here at these two countries. We just signed some deals. This is the exciting part about trade. And no, if you also listen to my show, this whole idea that the Bloomberg and some media outlets are trying to tell the American people that the bankruptcy rate is flying through the roof and record bankruptcies in farms in the United States, none of that's true. There's a little bit of a spike in bankruptcies in the Q1 of 2025 from Q1 of 2024. It still amounts to it's about 1/10%, just to put it in perspective. About 1/10% of all of America's farms are going through bankruptcy. That means 99.8, 99.9% of the farms are not. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to put that there. And the blame for it being about trade, they're blaming low prices on trade. And it's just fundamentally not true. Global prices are where they are, and they are that way here in the United States, obviously because of a global glut and oversupply. We're going to make 4.3 billion bushels of corn here in the United States this year, barring some catastrophe that takes out 6 states of fields between now and mid-September to October when the traditional grain belt starts harvesting. We're going to be at 4.3 billion bushels. You know what Brazil did this year? Brazil's harvest is done, pretty much 6 months off of ours. So about March, 6.1 billion bushels. Okay, so when I talk about this demand picture, I'm only pointing it out because, remember, it's a global marketplace. Where's this demand supposed to come from? You want some other numbers about Brazil? We're going to be at 83 million acres here this year of soybeans. They did about 120 million. So they're about 50% more acres of soybeans than we are. They're also growing their acreage. In a study that was done by environmental groups, it turns out that almost every farm in Brazil actually violated their deforestation agreement. They're supposed to not be putting more acres into production. They're supposed to be protecting the native species, the plants, and obviously the rainforest, but not even getting into the rainforest. Most of the Brazil soybean country isn't even what was formerly rainforest, but they're still violating their environmental pledges, and apparently nothing really happens about that. So 6.1 billion bushels. You're talking about 50% more acres than us and maybe 40% more soybeans than us. And we're talking about putting it out in the global marketplace, not to mention Argentina and all the other countries. So where's this demand supposed to come from? And I know that in ag, you've been trained. You have been indoctrinated since about 20 or so years ago to reference China, China, China. Great. Wonderful. Yes, China is the biggest export market for us for soybeans. They're also the huge market for Brazilian crops. So the point is, they're already tapped out. They will continue to consume, but they're not going to keep growing the amount they consume. If they did, every Chinese person would have to weigh like 900 pounds to keep on the rate of growth that they came between 2020 and 2025. The caloric consumption went up per Chinese person because their economy improved, et cetera. It's not going to happen again. So where's the demand going to come from? The United States has struck trade deals, and I'm going to tell you about that. And I'm going to question as to why you believe, and I don't think you do believe. If you tune into my show, you're like, hey, Damian, I know you're giving me the straight information. I don't necessarily always like to hear it, but we're going to have these problems. Yes, we do have these problems. I've been unable to get it out of my head here, working out here for 2 days on my farm. and one of my friends said, I'm surprised you let that guest carry on and spout stuff that's actually fundamentally not true about the global marketplace. I said, well, we'll get to that. Before I do, I want to remind you about my friends over at Redox. I'm wearing their hat, my sweat-browed hat here. It's from Redox. Redox is a company that's been around for 31 years. Darren Moon was in specialty crop, moved into turf, and now is increasingly putting his products, Redox bionutrient products, on broad acre, places like here in the Midwest. You know, it's 2025. You're going to have to use less nitrates. You're going to have to use less phosphates. You're going to have to use less harsh chemistry. This is coming from an environmental standpoint for us in agriculture. Why not get ahead of the curve and start changing up your product mix using stuff that can give you the same or better yields with stuff that also improves your soil and protects your plants? Redox provides carefully sourced nutrients combined with biostimulants that have been proven winners for 31 years. DiCap provides unequaled stress defense, increasing plant respiration and antioxidant production. It's also a fantastic source of potassium and phosphorus. That product is called DiCap. If you want to learn more about DiCap and the entire Redox line, go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. All right. So we've signed some trade deals, and I'm recording this here in August of 2025. So this might be old news, but I don't know when you're going to be listening to this show. We signed a deal just this week with Indonesia. And you're like, hey, that's great. Let me tell you some numbers about Indonesia. Indonesia is the fourth largest country on the planet in terms of population, about 280 million people. To put that in reference, the United States is 330 to 340 million people, depending on how many people we're deporting and whatnot right now. But it's around 330, 340 million Americans. So about 50 less million residents over there in Indonesia. Indonesia's economy is about 1%. So they're the fourth biggest country on the planet, but they're about 1% of global economic output as opposed to the 25% that we are. So why am I telling you these numbers? Because they have plenty of people, the fourth most humans of any country in the world. It goes China, then India, then United States, then Indonesia. But they don't have a lot of money. So they're going to buy our stuff, and they pledged a certain dollar amount of agricultural products they're going to buy. Good for us, good for Indonesia. They'll get food, keep feeding their population. Their population's not growing by much either. They're pretty much getting close to leveling out over there in Indonesia. Good for us, good for them, but it's not exactly another China or replacement to them. Got a fly in here. I apologize for that. Lots of construction workers coming and going. Flies. We've got a trade deal with Vietnam. Vietnam has a population of 100 million. So less than 1/3 of the United States of America, a decent economy, and a population that can eat our stuff. That's great. Fantastic. But we're talking about a country that, after all, is 1/13 the size of China. A deal with the United Kingdom, Britain. That's nice. That's nice. But Britain has their own farming sector, and Britain's only about 60 or so million people. We don't have these trade deals with everybody. We will get there, but I will continue to beg the question, asking the question, where do you think this new demand will come from? What if I just tell you, I'm very skeptical that we will grow demand more than by about 1% to 2% per year for the next decade or two, and our productive capacity is way more than growing by 1 or 2%. You know what our yields were back in 1980 when I told you we only put out 1.5 billion bushels, and now it's 4.3 billion bushels? We're going to be at, what, 53 to 4 bushels per acre on our soybean yield? What were we 45 years ago? Not even 20? Maybe 20? Probably not. We're obviously able to outproduce increases in demand. So then the question you're going to say is, well, we just have to have more countries. And this is something I'm going to shoot another short video about in my global series of my agricultural commentary, or Unleashed. When you talk about this new demand, I have heard this for years now at agricultural conferences. And they say, Africa. Africa is the opportunity for American agriculture. And I say, okay, I'm going to poke a lot of holes in why that's not going to be the case. Africa is a continent, not a country. Africa on this continent has 54 different countries. So when we think about Africa and we try to compare them to China, it's an absolutely asinine comparison to even make. There's roughly the same number of humans on the continent of Africa as are in the country of China, about 1.3 billion, okay? You're saying, well, there you go. And you're saying, and they're really poor, and they can eat food, and they're not going to be like China, where they're just kind of now where they're going to be on their consumption. They've got a lot of room for growth. That is true. But also, in the continent of Africa, there are 54 countries. Some of those countries don't even have one singular government because there's still tribal disputes and civil wars in these countries. So you'd have to make deals with more than 54 different governments, not counting various tribal situations. So how many different agreements are you supposed to come up with? Okay, that's one of the problems. Number two, infrastructure. We can grow stuff and ship it there. What the hell happens to it after it lands at the port? Largely, the continent is not largely. Much of the continent of Africa is undeveloped. No infrastructure. Ports, rail, highways, refrigeration, electrical grid. Of the 1.3 billion Africans, almost half of them, 600 million of them, do not have electricity. So you tell me how good of an agricultural customer someone that's living on 40 cents a day with no electricity is going to be for American agricultural products. So are you starting to understand when I keep asking the question, where is this demand supposed to come from? Where is it supposed to come from? The European Union is now have a trade agreement with the United States of America. This is big. Obviously, there's a lot of cultural similarities. America settled originally by Europeans. Common language with several of the countries, or at least many of the countries that are over there, use English as their business language. Advanced economies, and also in the flavor for things that we can produce if we start talking about more higher end stuff, right? So a trade agreement with the European Union is good. That's 27 countries that make up the European Union. But they have their own agricultural sector to protect. Remember, every time the French farmers get pissed about something, they go and drive their tractors around the Parliament building or past the Eiffel Tower, and sometimes they spew manure on things. The French farmers protest about as often as like American farmers, change their shirts. So you think that somehow the French marketplace of 60 or 80 million French people is going to be opened up to American ag products? Don't count on it. Germany's the same story. Remember, forever, Germany, protecting its two big agricultural companies, BASF and Bayer, pushed for bans on GMO imports. Why? Because GMOs are unsafe, because it's an environmental hazard, because GMOs are untested. That wasn't the real reason. The reason is because those two huge agricultural companies didn't have GMO technology. It was Monsanto that pioneered all of that, and that's why they were resistant to it. It was protectionism. It was not about actual safety or environmental issues. After Bayer bought Monsanto, immediately there was less concern about GMOs. Crazy how that works, isn't it? So I'm saying, where's this demand going to come from when you've got a European Union that wants to protect its own productivity? You know, we always are guilty of this in American agriculture, that we're kind of ignorant about what these other places look like. Man, trust me, when you go to Romania, they're not farming with donkeys and water buffalo. They have a modern agricultural system also, Poland, et cetera, et cetera. Are they as good at it as the United States? Arguably, maybe not quite as advanced technologically, but the point is there's still an ag sector there. About 450 million people throughout the European continent. So you got to ask your question, again, where's the demand going to come from? So I know I keep going on this point, but I think it's a very valid question for us to ask, because I've tuned in and I pay attention and I hear what the markets people say. We're going to have to pick up demand. Lower prices will create demand. Well, kind of. So then I'm going to ask you where you think this all goes. If I'm right, I've got a couple of big predictions about where I think things go. And I'm talking not 50 years from now. I'm talking the next year or 2 or 3. Where do I think things go? I got my predictions. Before I give them to you, I want to tell you about my friends over at Harvest Returns. Agriculture companies need every cutting edge they can get today in all aspects of their business, including finance. Agriculture, after all, is a globalized business. We're talking about that. And you are competing not just with the producers in the next county or state, you are competing with farms around the world. Why are you still getting financing the same way you always have? So Harvest Returns has 18,000 investors that put money into projects, and Harvest Returns says, you know what, we can help you grow your agricultural enterprise. For instance, I've got their hat right back here, the friends over there at Harvest Returns. You know what? There's like a company in Kansas doing some specialty stuff with meat. They needed financing to expand and modernize their facilities. They got their money through Harvest Returns investors. They can help you do this. So we're talking about revolutionizing the financing of agribusinesses to get the funding you need. Maybe you need money and you don't fit a traditional bank template. It doesn't mean that there's not money out there to get you to where you want it to go with your business. So visit harvestreturns.com. That's harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get started with growing your agricultural operation today. Okay, so my predictions, if I'm right, that demand is just where it's going to be. Yeah, we're going to pick up some product sales to a country that maybe Brazil was selling to, and then they'll pick them up, and there's going to be that. And sometimes it's because of monetary policy, and it's because the dollar is strong or the dollar is weak, or it's because shipping, or it's because of drought somewhere, or availability. I get all that. Perfect, fine. But in mass, in the big picture, what I'm talking about is I don't see a bunch of new demand coming on. It is what it is. So what's that mean for us? I'll give you a couple of options. First off, acres probably need to decrease. Are we as cheap of a producer as some of our global competitors? Depends on the commodity. I've not actually worked in Brazil, but I understand, obviously, their reason is they have cheaper land, cheaper labor, and as long as they can get their product to a market, they're a pretty competitive producer. And there's more than just Brazil, but I'm pointing this out to you to say, if we're to pick up new demand, how is it going to be structured? Where is it going to come from? And in mass, meaning in the big picture, I question that there's going to be a lot of new demand, okay? We know that we have some expanding economies. That's good. The best thing we can do is to hop on with the Indonesias and Mexico. 130 million people right across the border from us with an ascending economy. More manufacturing happening in Mexico, which means more Mexican residents have more money. When they have more money, they can buy more food, buy better food, and become a better customer. Chicken, pork, corn, a lot of stuff in the United States can go to Mexico. So expanding economies can help us. That could be a little bit of new demand. Acreage adjustment. Maybe we don't need, and we're going to finally admit, we don't need 95 million acres of corn. We don't need 83.5 million acres of soybeans in the United States. And the 47 million acres of wheat, we don't really need all that either. So what happens to it? I don't know. I've put this out there before. Maybe Conservation Reserve Program expansion. No, it's not going to get all gobbled up with solar. That's just not even happening. I mean, the amount we're talking about is just not significant enough to really move the needle on supply. Some acres could get idled. I believe, and you've heard me say this in past episodes, I believe that water will change the dynamic. If you are in an arid area in the Western Plains, if you're in California, your cost structure based on labor, water, and then environmental compliance is going to unfortunately cause you to have to make some hard decisions about your acreage. So acres will adjust, but we're talking about a pretty significant amount of acres that would need to adjust. You'd say, okay, what about ethanol? What about more biofuels? Well, we're already putting 40% of our corn crop in the tank and burning it. We're already taking 40% of the corn and burning it. How much more biofuel expansion do you really perceive as being necessary? Now, one thing that's price positive for us, this trade deal with Europe, allegedly they're going to buy $250 billion worth of energy products from us over a 3-year per year for 3 years. Now, I saw something that most people didn't see. Europe touted it. Trump touted it. Going to buy $750 billion of energy products, $250 a year for 3 years. There is a question as to whether or not we can even ramp up to do that. There's a question as to whether or not we even have the energy extraction capacity and or the ability to pipeline it and ship it to them to actually fulfill that pledge. It's a neat pledge, but it might be unattainable. The main thing, though, for biofuels is if we're selling energy, that means that there creates more demand for it, and it might be price positive for us because of biofuels. That's one thing. But again, how much do you think we're going to burn? Jet fuel made from crops is just too far away. I've had people on here and talk about it. It's about 4 times the price of normal Jet A to make sustainable aviation fuel. So yes, they're talking in Europe about Lufthansa and some of the great big airlines are going to be required to use some sustainable aviation fuel, a small percentage of it. I don't see that moving the needle tremendously right now. So I see acreage adjustment voluntarily, maybe involuntarily. I don't think it's going to be a government entity that comes and puts you out of business, but it could also be CRP, or it could be we limit your water because you're in an arid area, so we're not going to be growing corn in the panhandle of Texas anymore because, after all, we don't really need the corn. I could see some acre swaps, some acre idling. I could see it be based on water. I could see government programs. And here's the other one that I see. And I talked about this on my Business of Ag Success group just the other day. And this has been in my head a lot. If you don't know about the Business of Ag Success Group, I'd like you to consider joining it. It's $99 a month. It's me and a couple dozen industry professionals from all walks within agriculture. We get together on a Zoom call every other Friday, and we talk big picture, and we talk topics, and we talk small stuff, and we talk about deals, and we talk about money, and we talk about what's going on. It's a great little networking group. You can go and check it out at my website. But why am I telling you about all this? One of our members said, "Where do you think this goes?" I said, the United States Department of Agriculture hasn't let farms go bankrupt at a massive scale since the 1980s. Yeah, we can talk about bankruptcies being up, but again, 0.1% of farms in bankruptcy per year. Name an industry that rate exceeds. How many laundromats do you suppose go bankrupt? Think it's more than 0.1% per year? I would say that it probably is. Car dealerships, appliance stores, name it. More than 0.1% go through bankruptcy in industries outside of ag. So I don't see this as a concern. The U.S. Department of Agriculture policy is going to continue to prop up the ag sector. So if I'm accurate, we spend like $7 trillion a year as a country. Think about that. It's a remarkable number, an ungodly number. Government spending is like around between $5.5 and $7 trillion. It's a remarkable number. So the USDA floated $31 billion to farmers in March. It was announced in December, and it came about by March. That was the deal. There was some disaster stuff. And it was also just some price subsidies, if you will. Let's say they do that again here this fall, and I predict that they will. Let's say it ends up being 60. Let's say they say, you know what? Agriculture is a part of national security. We're going to protect these farms. We're going to keep them propped up because we want to make sure we're not dependent on other countries for our food. Just like we want to have a steel industry and a defense industry. You know, it's a matter of national security. Okay. And maybe the critics of whoever is in office, and whichever politics you're talking about, whoever is in office when this happens, there's going to be some critics and say, especially now with Trump, well, we wouldn't have to do this bail out the farmers if you didn't start these trade wars. And I've told you, again, that is absolutely not accurate. The trade wars didn't create $3.50 corn. A glut of corn created that. What I could see happening is almost an acceptance. Yep, we got to have ag, got to have the support, got to have a strong food sector, got to have cheap food for the masses. Why stop at 31 billion? Why stop at 60? Here's $100 billion every year we're just going to toss at farmers to keep them afloat. And you're saying that's a hell of a lot of money. But compared to, say, $7 trillion of spend per year at the government level, it's actually a little more than a rounding error. It's a heck of a lot of money, but on a percentage basis. And there could be an acceptance that we're just going to do this because we want to keep the ag sector afloat as a matter of national security. You say, great, I don't want to be a welfare recipient, but I guess I will be. And if you're a producer in agriculture. Here's the tough part. If we keep the tractors going and we keep the products being harvested and milk being milked and the cows being fed and the chickens laying eggs and all those other things and the almonds being picked and the apples being harvested, what do we do with all the stuff? That's the question. If we're pretty well oversupplied because demand just gets sort of stuck, demand just kind of hangs and stagnates, doesn't grow nearly at the rate of our productive capacity advances, what do we do with this stuff? So I've been posing this to my audiences. I look out over that crowd and I see a lot of people that maybe are like 36 years old. Love the fact that we have people that are 2 decades younger than me in this industry. But then I start telling them about things like the PIC program, which was 1983 and 1984, or the dairy buyout program, which was in the mid-80s, or the CRP program, which also came about in the mid-80s. Why do you think all of those programs were invented at almost identical times? Because of the 80s farm crisis, which was brought on singularly by excess supply on the global market. Yes, the grain embargo that Jimmy Carter started caused us problems. Yes, then other countries ramped up their ag production because the United States was not seen as a safe producer or a safe provider because he couldn't count on them. There were some of those things. And there was the interest rate issue. I'm telling you, the lantern that started the fire, this is the 1980s, was oversupply. And what happened then? The government got in the business of buying up commodities to take them off the market to create demand to thereby prop up the farm sector. Government cheese, look it up. They bought dairy and decided we got to do something because milk, after all, is a perishable product. What can we do? We can make it into cheese. You can store cheese for years. So they did. They made crappy, bad, not even that good of tasting government cheese. And where did it go? It got stored in caves. Oh, Damian, you're making stuff up. Look it up. Not right now because you're listening to my show. I have said maybe we are never going to have a bunch of new demand or not enough new demand to satisfy all of the stuff that we have piled up in our ability to produce. And if that's the case, maybe just $100 billion tossed at the farm sector every year becomes, yeah, you know what? It's just like the reason we give money to the Pentagon. Hell, they blow $100 billion on a Saturday. What's $100 billion to keep the ag sector afloat? Obviously, you get a lot of support from all the red states, all the agricultural country for this kind of spending. And the question I have then is what happens to the actual commodity? The other thing that could happen is we could end up seeing a reduction in yields as we turn more to nutrient density. Now, this is going to face a lot of institutional entrenchment. The big 4 grain handlers or the big 4 meat companies and even ag finance and then the Chicago Board of Trade CME group, all of them are entrenched in the institutional agriculture that they have created or thrived in. Bulk commodities, sold by the pound, a little bit of grading goes on, but we don't really upset the apple cart, start talking about things like nutrient density. Hell, we don't even necessarily like country of origin or where it came from or traceability because that kind of makes things a little bit harder, but it's coming. So maybe we lose some production. Maybe we lose some bushels or some pounds or some efficiencies, but we make a better product, a product that actually Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would love. Hey, Damian, you're making this all come around now. Maybe that's where this thing goes. It's not about bulk quantity anymore. It's about nutrients. It's about traceability. And it's about actually from field to food to plate. Maybe that's where we give up on some of the bulk quantities and start getting better at the quality. I'm not saying anything's wrong with our quality right now, but we can look around and see that we do have some health issues. We do have a tremendous amount of obesity, diabetes. We don't live nearly as long as we should. Our life expectancy has actually taken a little bit of a backwards step these last several years, whereas you would think as everything gets better, the human condition should improve, and we should be now having an average life expectancy of 85 instead of 75, where it seems to be stuck right now. And you could put ag in that equation. So maybe that's where things go. This is going to take a lot of moving of, again, you've got some institutional entrenchment where they're going to resist the heck out of this because it's not what we currently do, nor is it what they want to do. So that's where I see things going. I see possibly a USDA that just steps in and does even more of a backstop of ag and just tosses money literally out here at agriculture. Then they're going to figure out what they're going to do with all the stuff that we produce. I could see an adjustment in acres. I could see some hard times, but I don't think the USDA is going to do that. So what I think they're going to do is there's going to be a package. Let's remove the acres and we'll pay to do so. And that's really what they did with set aside back in the 50s, and then the CRP program, which began 40 years ago in the mid-1980s. So maybe we see something more like that. That's where I see things going. I'm going to continue to ask the question, where do you think demand will come from? I gave you a bunch of numbers, I know, because I want you to really be thinking about that. Again, our best hope also, and I told you the other one, some countries that are developing. There's some countries that just are a long way away. Again, if you're counting on almost any country in Africa, in the African continent, if you're thinking that that's going to be the new China, think again. I gave you the numbers. Less than 2% of the global economy. They got 1.3 billion people there. Same number as India, same number as China on the whole African continent, and they're less than 2% of the global economy. There's not a lot of money there. There's not a lot of infrastructure. There's not a lot of opportunity there. At least not for your lifetime and mine in this business of agriculture. So, ask the question where demand is coming from. I will continue to ask these questions, and if you have any thoughts, please share them with me. I'm just here to tell you, ag from where I see it, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But I told you where things will go on the supply side, because that's probably our best bet. If demand is where it is, then maybe our answer is changing the supply, improving the supply, or reducing the supply. I'm Damian Mason. Thanks for tuning in here. Remember my friends over at Harvest Returns, my friends over at Redox, and of course my main sponsor, Newfields-Ag. Newfields-Ag sent some guys out here to my field day that I did for Title Grow with my XtremeAg partnership. It went swimmingly well, my first ever field day. So you can check out some of that highlights online. Go and do follow me if you would, please. Hit subscribe when you go to my YouTube channel. Until next time, thanks for being here. This is the Business of Agriculture. Hey, sincere thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Business of Agriculture. I want to ask you, if you farm, are you looking for more productive efficiencies to grow higher yielding, better performing crops? Well, of course you are. Newfields-Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. If you want to learn more about the Newfields-Ag product lineup, go to newfieldsag.com for information.